My name is Lauren. I'm 36 years old, a veterinarian, and 5 years ago, my world fell apart in a way I still sometimes struggle to believe was real. The day it happened was supposed to be one of the happiest of my life, my engagement day. I was finally going to celebrate something I had waited a long time for. After years of focusing on my career, patching up broken hearts from the past, and convincing myself I might just end up alone, I met Andrew, and suddenly all those lonely nights didn't matter anymore. Andrew wasn't flashy or loud. He was kind, gentle, steady. He worked as a forestry engineer and had this calm presence that could silence any storm inside me. We met at a local fundraiser for rescued animals. I remember him crouching down to pet a three-legged dog with more tenderness than I'd seen in any man before. That was it. I was gone. We dated for almost 4 years before he proposed. I said yes without hesitation. Our families were thrilled, or so I thought. My parents adored Andrew. My younger sister, Megan, who had always been more complicated, even seemed to approve. She was 4 years younger than me, artistic, impulsive, and always a bit of a mystery to everyone. Growing up, she was the wild one, the beautiful one, the one our parents always seemed to bend the rules for. I didn't mind. Or maybe I just got used to being the responsible one, the backup plan, the support system. Our engagement party was held at my parents' property, a small, beautiful ranch in the Oregon countryside. We strung fairy lights across the backyard, lit citronella candles, and played soft music under the trees. Everything felt like a warm dream. Andrew gave a sweet, humble speech. I cried. People clapped. Megan toasted us with a glass of white wine, her blue eyes shining. I remember thinking for once we all felt like a real family. About an hour into the party, I stepped away to check on my mother's dog, Jasper. He's an old golden retriever, deaf in one ear, and nervous around large groups. He was staying in the back kennel near the old barn, and I wanted to make sure he had water. I remember humming as I walked across the lawn, still feeling the high of Andrew's words, the way his hand had felt in mine. The air smelled like lavender and grilled corn. It was one of those soft Oregon evenings where the sun sets slow and the trees seemed to hold their breath. After checking on Jasper, I started heading back toward the party. But then I heard something. Not voices exactly, more like laughter. Soft, intimate, coming from the side of the barn. I paused. It was probably nothing. Maybe a couple of guests snuck off for a smoke. Maybe my dad and uncle were telling one of their dumb jokes. But then I heard my name, whispered, followed by the sound of a deep voice I recognized too well. I crept closer. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. I didn't mean to see anything. I just did. And what I saw broke me. Broke. Andrew was standing there in the shadow of the barn, his hands on Megan's waist. She was leaning into him, her face tilted up. And they were kissing. Not the way you kiss someone on the cheek. Not even the way two people sneak a kiss when they think no one's watching. This was different. It was full of hunger, history, intimacy. I froze. My brain refused to accept what my eyes saw. I stood there maybe 5 seconds, maybe 5 years, I don't know. Then I turned and walked away. No, I ran. I didn't scream, I didn't confront them, I didn't cry. I just left. I took my car keys out of my clutch, stepped into the driver's seat, and drove away from that glowing backyard full of fairy lights, applause, and lies. My phone lit up almost instantly with texts from Andrew, then from Megan. But I didn't answer. I checked into a roadside motel 20 miles away, the kind where the walls are thin and the sheets smell like bleach. I sat on the edge of the bed in my engagement dress, staring at the mirror. And for the first time in my life, I didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. She looked like someone who had believed in something and had just watched it burn. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on top of the stiff motel blanket, still in my dress, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. My mind kept replaying the moment like a broken projector, Andrew's hand on Megan's back, the way she tilted her head, his mouth on hers. I kept hoping I'd misunderstood, that there was some insane explanation, that I'd wake up and realize I'd imagined it all. But the truth sat cold in my chest, and when the sun rose, it brought no clarity, just a dull ache like a bruise spreading through my entire body. At around 6 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Andrew. I'm sorry, I never wanted you to find out like that. Megan, we need to talk, please don't hate me. Andrew, I didn't plan this. It just happened. It just happened. That phrase, that lazy, pathetic excuse, like betrayal was a spilled drink or a missed appointment, not a conscious choice repeated over and over again behind my back. I didn't answer. Instead, I called my best friend Kira. She picked up on the first ring. Lauren, what's going on? Are you okay? I couldn't speak. For a second, nothing came out. And then, like a dam breaking, the words poured out of me. Broken, jagged, raw. I saw them, I whispered. Who? Andrew and Megan, together. At the barn, kissing like they've done it before. There was a long silence. Then Kira said quietly, that son of a bitch. And just like that, I started crying. Not graceful tears, not a single drop down the cheek. I was sobbing messy and loud and shaking all over. Kira didn't say anything more. She just stayed on the line while I fell apart. Later that morning, she drove out to the motel. She brought fresh clothes, coffee, and cinnamon rolls from my favorite bakery in town. She didn't push me to talk, just sat beside me, her presence like a warm blanket over my grief. By noon, my parents had started calling. First my mom, then my dad, then both of them alternating between calls and voicemails. Lauren, sweetheart, can we please talk? Don't make this harder than it needs to be. You need to come home and deal with this like an adult. I ignored them all. That afternoon, I drove back to my apartment in Portland. Andrew had a spare key, but I changed the locks before I even took off my shoes. Kira stayed with me that night. The next morning, I knew I had to go back home just for one thing. My things. I needed to pack up what was left at my parents' place. Dresses, heirlooms, a few old books. I told myself I'd be in and out in under 20 minutes, but nothing could have prepared me for what I walked into. It was quiet when I pulled up the gravel driveway. Too quiet. My mother's car was there. So was my dad's truck. And Megan's car. I walked up the steps slowly, unsure of what I would say or do. When I opened the front door, I nearly dropped my keys. They were all in the living room. Andrew was sitting on the couch. Megan was curled next to him, her head on his shoulder like she belonged there. My parents were across from them sipping coffee, calm, at ease, like this was just another Sunday morning, like they hadn't watched my entire life explode 2 days earlier. My mother looked up and gave me a tight, almost sad smile. Oh, good you're here, she said as if I were late to brunch. I stared at them, unable to speak. My dad stood. Lauren, listen. Let's just be civil about this. No need to make a scene. My mouth opened, but no words came. Andrew had the audacity to look sheepish. Megan couldn't even meet my eyes. Then my mother said something I will never forget. I know this is hard, sweetheart, but try to see the bigger picture. Maybe this was meant to happen. Maybe Andrew and Megan. Maybe they were just meant to find each other. I laughed, loud, bitter. Meant to happen, I said. You mean him cheating on me with my sister on the night of our engagement? That's what we're calling fate now. You're being dramatic, my father snapped. You're not a child. These things happen. People fall in and out of love. In and out of love? I repeated, my voice rising. He proposed to me. We were planning a wedding. And now things have changed, my mother said gently. You can either accept it, or you can make yourself miserable. I turned to Megan, who was still silent, still staring down at her hands. Say something, I told her. Look at me and say something. She looked up. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. I'm sorry you had to find out that way. But I love him and he loves me. I didn't plan this, but I'm not going to apologize for following my heart. Something inside me snapped then. Not in an explosive movie-style meltdown. No, it was quieter than that, like a thread pulled too tight finally giving way. I realized in that moment that I had never truly been seen in this family. Not for who I was, not for what I gave. I was the fixer, the helper, the one who didn't cause problems, the one who gave up the bigger slice of cake, the one who stayed home with grandma, the one who paid Megan's rent twice without ever being thanked. And now I was just collateral damage in their fairy tale. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just turned around and walked out. Upstairs, I packed everything I owned into 2 suitcases. I left the family photos, the keepsakes, the embroidered pillow my mom made in high school that said sisters are forever. I left it all. Downstairs, I passed them again. They were still sitting in that room, still pretending this was normal, still drinking their coffee. "Where are you going?" my mother asked. I paused at the door. "Where I belong," I said quietly. "Anywhere but here." Then I walked out and didn't look back. The silence after I left the house was louder than any argument could have been. No one followed me, no one called, no one asked if I was okay. It was as if they had decided I didn't matter. And maybe they had decided that long before this moment. Maybe I just hadn't wanted to see it until now. Driving away, I felt numb. I wasn't crying anymore. I wasn't screaming. I was just empty. A hollow shell in a borrowed car heading nowhere, with 2 suitcases full of clothes and a lifetime of unspoken grief. I stayed with Kira that night, and the next and the next. She didn't ask questions. She made up the guest bed, brought me chamomile tea, and quietly took my phone whenever it buzzed. She became a shield I didn't know I needed. And while I sat there on her couch staring blankly at a rerun of some cooking show I didn't care about, I began to remember. Not just what had happened recently, but the years that led to it. The slow, subtle erosion of my place in the family. The moments that seemed small, but were sharp enough to leave permanent marks. Like when I was 12 and got accepted into an advanced science program. I was so proud I'd spent weeks working on that application. But when I told my parents, my mom had smiled politely, then said, "That's great, honey. Megan just started painting horses. She's so creative, isn't she?" Or when I was 17 and got into my first choice college on scholarship, and they made me cancel a campus tour because Megan had a recital the same weekend. Or prom night. God, prom night. I was 16. Grandma had given me a necklace she'd worn to her own prom, a delicate opal pendant on a thin silver chain. I adored it. It felt like history, like love, like something sacred. Megan was 14 and begged to wear it to a school dance the week before mine. I told her no, not because I didn't love her, but because I wanted it for my special night. Just one thing that was mine. She cried. She pouted. She told our parents I was being mean that I never let her have anything. And they took her side. "Oh, Lauren, don't be selfish," my mom said. "You're the older one. Let her feel special too." I gave in. I always did. She wore it. She lost it. She never found it again. When I cried when I got angry, when I said I'd never forgive her, my mom scolded me. She didn't mean to. It was an accident. Don't make her feel worse. That was the story of my childhood. Megan was chaos, and I was the cleanup crew. She was the sparkle, and I was the support beam. Whenever she made a mess, I was told to be understanding. Whenever I got hurt, I was told not to overreact. They praised her spontaneity, her emotion, her wildness, while telling me I was so mature for my age, as if that were a reward instead of a burden. Even in adulthood, the pattern never really changed. When Megan bounced between jobs, I was the one they asked to help cover her bills. When she got drunk at Christmas and knocked over the tree, I was the one who cleaned up the glass. When she showed up uninvited to my apartment 2 years ago, crying about yet another breakup, I made her tea and let her stay the night even though she'd ghosted me for months before that. Because that's what I did. I held it together while she fell apart. Until she took Andrew. Until she looked me in the eye and said she couldn't apologize for following her heart. I remember sitting in Kira's apartment holding that memory like a shard of glass, my hand bleeding, and still I refused to drop it. Why did I expect anything different? Why did I believe after everything that this time someone would choose me? It's a strange kind of heartbreak when you realize the people who were supposed to protect you were quietly complicit in your pain. It's even stranger when you realize you've been complicit too, by accepting so little for so long. That week, while Megan and Andrew posted their first photo as a couple on social media, my parents wrote me an email, a long rambling message filled with phrases like, "Life doesn't always go as planned, and we hope you can find it in your heart to forgive, and family comes first. Family comes first." But I had never been first, and now I finally saw it. The engagement was never just about Andrew. Losing him hurt, but the deeper wound came from realizing I was never really a part of the team. I was the bench warmer, the alternate, the second thought. That's what betrayal does. It doesn't just break your heart, it rewrites your history. I stopped responding to their messages. I didn't block them, not yet. I just went quiet. My phone became a machine that only served to remind me of everything I had lost. So I turned it off, and I started planning how to leave not just them, but the version of myself who kept making excuses for people who never showed up. I told Kira I was done with this town, this family, this story. And she said, "Good, because the next chapter doesn't need them." She helped me pack what little I had, and I moved into a tiny guest house behind a friend's vet clinic in Portland. It was cramped, drafty, and smelled like cedar, but it was mine. Every inch of it. And for the first time in my life, I could hear myself think, no one else's voice, no one else's chaos, just me, just quiet, just beginning again. Starting over felt like waking up after a long illness. At first, everything was foggy. The days blurred together in a quiet rhythm of small tasks. Wake up, feed the clinic cats, stock the shelves, review patient charts. Sleep, repeat. There were no big moments, no grand gestures, just the slow, steady business of surviving heartbreak. The guest house behind the vet clinic wasn't glamorous, but it became my sanctuary. It had one bedroom, a kitchenette that barely fit a fridge, and an old clawfoot tub that creaked when I stepped in. But I loved it. The walls were mine. The silence was mine. My life was finally mine. The clinic itself was small, but it was everything I needed. The owner, a quiet woman named Dr. Patel, offered me a part-time position when she heard about what had happened. She didn't pry, just handed me a set of scrubs and said, "We're short on help. If you want the hours, they're yours." I took every hour she gave me. I worked weekends, late nights, holidays. I cleaned kennels, assisted surgeries, answered phones. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was grounding. I needed to be needed. I needed something to pour myself into that wasn't grief. In those early months, my world was reduced to three things: animals, coffee, and silence. And surprisingly, it healed me. Animals are uncomplicated. They don't lie. They don't manipulate. They don't pretend to love you while secretly kissing your sister behind the barn. They just show up messy, scared, hurt, and ask for help. And I knew how to help. One day, a woman brought in a senior pit bull named Margot who'd been rescued from a dogfighting ring. Margot was scarred, anxious, and trembled every time a door opened. No one wanted to adopt her, but I did. She became my shadow. She slept at the foot of my bed and followed me from room to room like a tiny, anxious bodyguard. It was like we understood each other, two creatures trying to learn trust again. Slowly, my days began to stretch wider. I joined a hiking group on the weekends. I started reading again, mostly memoirs and books about women who rebuilt themselves after everything fell apart. I even got a tiny tattoo on my rib cage, a thin outline of a mountain range, to remind myself that climbing is hard, but the view is always worth it. A year passed, then two. By year 3, I'd gone from part-time vet assistant to co-manager of the clinic. Dr. Patel began handing off more responsibilities, even hinting that she might retire soon. "You've got the heart for this work," she told me once. "And the grit." I smiled, but didn't say much. Compliments still made me flinch. I was used to being invisible or useful, but not admirable. But I was starting to believe her. Eventually, I saved enough money to rent a small storefront nearby. My dream had always been to open a low-cost animal rescue and rehab center, a place where senior dogs, anxious strays, and abandoned pets could find healing just like Margot had. By year 4, it was real. I called it Second Chance Paws. The sign was simple, the paint was cheap, the front windows fogged up in the winter, but inside it was magic. People came. not just for the animals, but for what the place represented. We hosted weekly adoption fairs. Local kids came to volunteer. I partnered with community centers to bring therapy dogs to nursing homes and hospitals. And slowly word got around, not just about the rescue, but about me. I became known in the area not as the woman who'd been left at her engagement party, but as the woman who'd built something out of the ashes. Sometimes I'd hear a whisper at events. "That's Lauren, yeah, the vet who runs the rescue." No, she started it all on her own. I didn't need to correct them. I didn't need to add. Actually, I started it after my fiancé cheated on me with my sister and my parents sided with them, because none of that defined me anymore. It was part of the story, but it wasn't the whole story. Megan and Andrew faded into the background like a bad dream. Occasionally, I'd hear snippets from mutual acquaintances. They're still together, I think. Struggling financially. Moved a couple times. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. I never blocked them. But I never reached out. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for an apology. I didn't need one. Forgiveness. I was learning didn't have to come with reconciliation. You could choose peace and still choose distance. The only time I looked back was during moments of stillness, like when I'd be sweeping the rescue floor after a long day with tired paws curled at my feet and jazz playing softly on the radio. In those moments, I'd remember the girl I used to be, the girl who begged for crumbs of approval, the girl who tried to earn love by being useful, the girl who stayed quiet so others could feel louder. And I'd whisper to her softly, almost like a prayer, "You're safe now. You did it." By the time year 5 rolled around, I had everything I thought I'd never find again. Stability, peace, a sense of belonging not to a family that tolerated me, but to a community that saw me. One afternoon, I hosted a small adoption event in the park. Kids played with puppies. An older woman cried as she held her new cat, telling me it reminded her of the one she lost during her husband's final year. As the sun set, Kira showed up with cupcakes and a bottle of sparkling cider. "To you," she said, handing me a paper cup. I raised mine. To second chances. Later that night, I curled up on the couch with Margot at my feet and a book in my lap. The windows were open, and the summer breeze carried in the faint sound of laughter from the sidewalk outside. And just before I closed my eyes, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number. I stared at it, hesitant. Something in my gut tightened. I didn't know yet how that one call would change everything. I didn't know the past was about to knock on my carefully built door, but I was about to find out. The phone kept ringing. It was an unfamiliar number, but something about it felt known, like a faint smell from childhood or a song you haven't heard in years. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call came. Same number. I stared at the screen, heart racing, not from fear exactly, but from a sharp, bracing instinct. Something was wrong. After the third call, I finally picked up. "Hello?" There was a long silence on the other end. And then Lauren. My stomach dropped. It was my mother. Her voice was strained thinner than I remembered, like it had been run through a sieve of years and regret. "What do you want?" I asked. My tone was flat, emotionless. The armor I'd spent years forging clicked into place immediately. "Oh, honey," she breathed. "Thank God you answered. Something's happened." I didn't respond. "It's Megan," she said. "She's not well. They're in serious trouble, Lauren." I didn't know who else to call. Of course it was Megan. It had always been Megan. I almost hung up right then. But something stopped me. Not compassion, not hope, curiosity maybe. What kind of trouble, I asked, my voice still calm. She and Andrew started a business. My mother began speaking in a rushed, trembling way, like someone trying to outrun a train. Consulting or something, I don't know, it failed. They took out loans, credit cards, and now they're in deep with the wrong people. I said nothing, just stared out the window watching a couple walk their golden retriever across the street. "They borrowed money," she continued, "from people you can't just ignore. They're threatening Megan. They've come to the house. Your father and I gave them everything we had. retirement, savings. We even dipped into the college fund we set aside for. She stopped herself. For my future kids, I said coolly. The ones I no longer plan to have because you all made sure I'd never feel safe starting a family. Lauren, please, she whispered. Don't be cruel. This is your sister. No, I said, my tone sharp enough to slice through her desperation. She stopped being my sister the night she kissed my fiancé behind a barn, and you called it fate. She's pregnant, my mother blurted out, as if that somehow erased the past. I went still. Of course she was. Of course Megan was pregnant. Because chaos never arrives alone, it brings company. And this time it had brought new life as collateral. She needs help, my mother continued. She's scared. We're scared. And you're the only one who's doing well enough to. There it was, the real reason for the call. Not concern, not reconciliation, just calculation. I let the silence stretch so long, I thought she might hang up. Instead, she whispered, "Could you help us pay them off? Just enough to stop the threats. Just a loan. You have your rescue, your clinic. We know you're doing well." I felt something inside me turn to steel. 5 years of silence. 5 years of healing, of rebuilding, of dragging myself up from the pit they left me in. 5 years of learning how to breathe without their weight on my chest. And now the first time they reach out, they want money. No, I said the words solid and immovable. What? No, I repeated. I won't help you. Lauren, please, she said. If they don't get the money, that's not my problem, I interrupted. You all made your choices. Megan made hers, Andrew made his, and you stood by them. This isn't about the past, she cried. This is about life or death. No, I said again, slower now. This is about boundaries, something I learned after you broke every one of mine. She was silent. I won't be the firewood you burn to keep Megan warm, I said. Not again. And I hung up. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from the thrill of finally fully choosing myself. I didn't cry. I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. But I was wrong. It wasn't over. 30 minutes later, the buzzer at the front door of the rescue shrieked through the building. I glanced at the video feed on the tablet by my desk and felt my heart lurch. It was Megan. She looked nothing like the sister I once knew. Her hair was unbrushed, her eyes were wild, her sweatshirt clung to her body like it hadn't been washed in days. And next to her, Andrew. He was thinner, his face gaunt and twitchy like he hadn't slept in weeks. I didn't answer, but they didn't leave. Megan began shouting my name into the intercom. Lauren, I know you're in there. You can't ignore us. I muted the feed. 10 minutes later, they were banging on the back door of the rescue center. By then, the few staff members still in the building were on edge. One of them peeked through the blinds and said, is that your family? I walked to the back door, calm on the outside, burning on the inside. When I opened the door, just a crack. Megan pushed it wide. You owe me, she snapped. Andrew stood behind her, nervously glancing around. I stood my ground. You need to leave. You have money, Megan spat. You have this place. You're doing fine. And I'm about to lose everything. You lost me a long time ago, I said quietly. She shoved a crumpled envelope into my hand. Sign it. It's a promissory note. Just say you'll cover part of the debt. Just $10,000. We'll pay you back. I looked down at the paper, then back at her. You still think I'm the safety net, don't you? I said. We're family, she hissed. No, I replied. We're blood. That's not the same thing. She lunged forward like she might physically stop me from closing the door, but I was faster. I slammed it shut and turned the lock, then pressed the panic button under my desk. It alerted both the building's internal security and local police. Within minutes, sirens wailed in the distance. Through the one-way glass, I watched Megan and Andrew panic just like I had years ago, when everything I knew collapsed in a single night. Only now I wasn't the one breaking. They were. They didn't leave. Even after I shut the door and locked it, even after the alarm had quietly alerted building security, Megan and Andrew stayed. They paced just outside the rescue center's rear entrance, muttering to each other. Megan's face kept flashing between desperation and fury, like she couldn't decide whether to beg or attack. Andrew kept glancing behind him, twitchy, pale, paranoid. Then Megan started pounding on the glass. "Lauren, open the door." "You can't ignore us forever. We're your family." I stood just behind the front counter, watching it all play out through the internal security monitors. Every part of me wanted to shut the feed off, but I couldn't. Not yet. I needed to see this through. One of my volunteers peeked over my shoulder. "Should I call someone I already did?" I said, "Just stay back." I stepped outside the hallway near the side entrance of the building. There was a dome camera mounted to the ceiling, one of several I'd had installed a few years ago after a break-in at a neighboring business. I stood directly beneath it where the hallway light glowed soft and golden, holding my phone loosely in my hand, waiting. Then the pounding stopped. Silence. Too quiet. And then fast, heavy footsteps. The door burst open. Megan charged in first, red face shaking. Andrew followed, less certain but still behind her. They had managed to pry open the back gate, probably with something as simple as a flathead screwdriver. My building was secure, but not meant to keep out people who were desperate and had nothing left to lose. "You shouldn't have done that," I said calmly. Megan ignored me. She walked straight toward me and shoved a paper into my chest. "You have to help us," she screamed. "Do you understand? They're threatening us. We're not safe. You're rich now, you can afford it." "I'm not rich," I replied. "I just work hard. You should try it sometime." Andrew lunged forward and tried to snatch the phone from my hand. I moved just in time. "Don't you dare record us," he growled. "You don't get to paint us like villains. We're not the ones who abandoned family." I looked him straight in the eyes. "You're right," I said softly. "You didn't abandon me. You betrayed me." Then Megan shoved me. It wasn't a light push. I stumbled back against the wall, catching myself on the corner of the counter. The pain radiated up my spine, but I didn't cry out. Instead, I reached for the keychain on the nearby hook. Attached to it was a small gray remote with a red button in the center, the second panic alert. This one was for law enforcement. I pressed it and held it down for 3 seconds. No sound, no flashing light. But I knew what it meant. Help was already on the way. Megan was still screaming. "You owe me. You were always the favorite. Everyone thought you were perfect. You got everything, school jobs, Dad's respect. And now you're sitting here acting like you're better than us." I tilted my head. "I never got Dad's respect," I said. "I got his expectations. And I met them. That's not favoritism, that's responsibility." She threw the crumpled promissory note at my face. "You think you're so above us," she hissed. "You think just because you have this little rescue you're untouchable?" I smiled. "No," I said. "I think I'm protected. By the law, by my boundaries, and by every choice I made to never become like you." That's when the alarm started. A blaring siren echoed through the hallway, the one tied to the panic button triggered from the main office security. Megan froze. Andrew's eyes went wide. "What did you do?" he whispered. I pointed up at the ceiling. The red light on the security camera blinked once. "Smile," I said. "You're on a recorded loop." Moments later, we heard the sharp, echoing sounds of police sirens. Andrew bolted toward the front entrance as if he could still make it out. Too late. 2 uniformed officers entered the building, along with my building's security manager, who was pointing toward my hallway, visibly shaken. "They forced their way in," I told the officer. "She pushed me. He tried to grab my phone. I have it all on tape. You can check the live feed." Megan, suddenly tearful, switched tactics. "Officer, thank God," she said, her voice trembling. "She's lying." "This is a family dispute. We were just trying to talk to her. She locked us out." The officer didn't flinch. "Ma'am, forcing your way into a private business and assaulting someone isn't a family dispute. That's a crime." Andrew tried to interrupt. "We didn't break anything. We just needed help. But you shoved my staff. Tried to take property that wasn't yours. And we have you on surveillance doing it," the security manager cut in. The officers moved quickly. "Handcuffs! Miranda rights!" Megan shrieked as they let her out. Andrew looked like he was going to be sick. As they passed me, Megan turned her head. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, eyes wide and pleading. "Lauren, please tell them to stop." "You can't let them do this. You're my sister." I looked at her. I saw the girl I used to protect, the woman who took what wasn't hers and called it destiny. And I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no satisfaction, just silence. They disappeared into the police car lights flashing behind them. I stood in the quiet that followed the only sound coming from the panting of a nervous bulldog in the lobby. Then I exhaled. For the first time in 5 years, I exhaled completely. It had been a week since the police came. The story made its way around town, as stories always do in places like this. Whispers in coffee shops, half-told versions at PTA meetings, the kind of tale that starts with, "You know Lauren" from the rescue, and ends with a gasp. I didn't try to correct any of it. Let people think what they wanted. I had no interest in controlling the narrative anymore. Then one evening, quiet still, the kind of Oregon dusk that makes everything feel painted in blue, I heard my doorbell ring. Not at the rescue. At home. I checked the camera feed on my front door, half expecting to see a delivery. But it was them, my parents, standing side by side, older than I remembered. Not in the way people age over time, but in the way people crumble under pressure. Shoulders hunched, faces drawn, they looked small. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. "Lauren," my mother said, eyes, glassy voice trembling. Can we talk?" I stepped aside, not as an invitation, just so they didn't block the doorway. They took it as permission and entered cautiously, like people stepping into a church they hadn't been to in years. They stood in the entryway looking around at the life I had built. The books, the plants, the framed photos of dogs and volunteers, the warmth, a home, not the house I grew up in, not the place where I learned how to shrink. This one was mine, every inch of it. My father spoke first. "We were wrong," he said. "About everything." I didn't answer. "We thought—" He paused, trying to find footing. "We thought we were doing what was best, keeping peace, supporting Megan. But you abandoned me," I said, voice low even. "You watched your daughter get humiliated and chose not to stand by her." My mother started crying then. Not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind. The kind where guilt finally catches up and has nowhere left to hide. "We've lost everything," she said. "Our friends won't speak to us. Your Aunt Carol won't return our calls. People are ashamed to know us." There it was, not grief, reputation. I looked at her, then him. "You're not sorry for what you did," I said. "You're sorry you got caught." "No," she whispered. "That's not true." But I held up a hand. "It's okay. I believe that you feel bad. But I also know why you're here." They looked confused. "You want me to forgive you so the weight lifts off of you," I said. "You want closure. But this isn't about what you need anymore. It's about what I need." They went still. I took a deep breath. "I forgive you." My mother gasped softly. But I continued. "Forgiveness doesn't mean I forget. And it doesn't mean we start over." My father opened his mouth to protest, but stopped himself. "I forgive you," I said again, "because I need to. Not for you. For me. So I can finally stop carrying all of it." They stood in silence, taking in the words. Then I added, "That door is closed. The version of me that waited for your approval, for your understanding, that version is gone." They nodded. They didn't argue. Maybe for once they understood that they no longer had the right. I walked them to the door. My mother turned back as she stepped outside, her voice barely above a whisper. "I do love you, Lauren. I know I said, and I meant it. But love without protection isn't enough. Love without accountability isn't healing." They left, and they didn't come back. 6 months later, I hosted a dinner at my place. Just a few close friends, some homemade pasta, and a lot of laughter. Kira raised her glass and smiled. To Lauren, she said, "Who didn't wait to be rescued? Who built her own damn sanctuary?" Later that night, I stood on my balcony looking out at the quiet city lights. I thought of Megan, of my parents, of everything lost. And I felt no bitterness, only peace. We don't always get the family we deserve, but we can create the life we do. I chose myself, and I've never felt more free.